We turn now to President Trump's latest attacks on Somali immigrants in Minnesota.
Minnesota is reeling from a fraud scandal involving $1 billion siphoned from multiple federal programs during the COVID pandemic. In the past 3 years, 87 people have been charged, 61 convicted, most of Somali descent.
Hello, we'd like to ask where the money's going.
What was this money spent on? 1.26 million. What was that money spent on?
Potentially the largest fraud scandal in U.S. history is taking place in Minnesota, as literally billions of dollars have been funneled through Somali-ran fraudulent businesses.
A massive fraud case, once dismissed as pandemic chaos, is now being treated as something far bigger. The FBI is surging resources into Minnesota, warning that hundreds of millions stolen may be just the surface.
Happening right now in the quiet suburbs of St. Cloud, Minnesota, a massive federal task force has just breached the doors of what appeared to be a standard property management firm, but what investigators are calling a $500 million shadow bank. We are here today to announce the largest coordinated raid in the history of central Minnesota, targeting a sophisticated financial engine that fueled a shadow state and laundered the proceeds of the most massive fraud rings in the American heartland. At exactly 6 o'clock this morning, while the fog still hung over the Mississippi River, over 200 federal agents, led by the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division and the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit, swarmed a commercial complex off Division Street. This wasn't just about a few missing tax forms. This was a surgical strike against the counting house of the Minneapolis-St. Cloud corridor. This firm, operating under a fictional name like North Star Property Solutions, wasn't actually managing apartments. It was managing the physical and digital wealth of a transnational criminal enterprise. When the tactical teams entered, they found a scene that looked more like a high-stakes trading floor in Manhattan than a small-town real estate office. Walls of monitors tracked international wire transfers in real time, and industrial-grade shredders were already whirring, attempting to destroy the ledgers that linked these offices to the money mules and bunkers we've previously exposed. But the feds were faster. They secured the servers, the encrypted hardware wallets, and the physical books that detailed a $500 million shell game. For years, this operation has functioned as a shadow bank, providing the liquidity for the Somali-led fraud rings that have systematically drained the Minnesota Department of Human Services. The investigation, codenamed Operation Paper Trail, reveals that the $250 million stolen from the Somali nonprofits was just the seed money. Once that cash was harvested from state coffers, it needed to be parked somewhere safe where it could grow and be laundered through legitimate-looking assets. That's where the St. Cloud Shadow Bank came in. They specialized in property fraud, using stolen identities and straw buyers to purchase hundreds of single-family homes and apartment buildings across the Midwest. By inflating the prices of these properties and then selling them to other shell companies within their own network, they were able to wash the bunker cash into clean, taxable real estate equity. Federal analysts found that this single firm controlled over 300 properties in Stearns County alone, all while claiming zero taxable income and operating on state-funded subsidies. The sheer audacity of the scheme is what caught the attention of the IRS. The firm was receiving millions in housing stabilization services payments from the state to house the very people they were already exploiting through their fake daycare and autism centers. It was a closed-loop system of corruption. The state paid for the fraud, and the fraud paid for the properties, and the properties housed the fraud. But the most chilling discovery inside the St. Cloud offices wasn't the real estate ledgers. It was the informant log. Taped to the inside of a hidden wall safe, agents found a list of local zoning officials, city inspectors, and even a fictionalized state representative who had been receiving monthly retainers to ensure that the North Star properties were never inspected and their business licenses were always fast-tracked. The shadow state wasn't just an outside force. It had successfully bought its way into the local government of St. Cloud. This bank provided the social lubrication needed to keep the wheels of corruption turning without a squeak. Every time a whistleblower tried to raise the alarm about the overcrowded apartment complexes or the suspicious wire transfers, the shadow bank's legal team and their retained officials would crush the investigation before it could reach a judge. This is why the AVD of this investigation is so critical, because we are digging into the layer that actually protects the criminals from the law. The St. Cloud Shadow Bank functioned as a firewall. They used mirror trading and hawala systems to move funds to Dubai and Turkey, but they kept the bulk of the wealth in Minnesota real estate because they believed they owned the local authorities. They were so confident that they kept a physical master key to every property they owned in a glass case in the lobby, a symbol of their dominance over the regional housing market. But that glass was shattered this morning. As federal agents loaded boxes of evidence into white vans, the physical scale of the wealth became apparent. They found jewelry, gold bars, and high-end watches worth millions hidden in the ceiling tiles of the break room. These were the bonuses paid out to the high-level managers of the fraud rings. While the average citizen of St. Cloud is struggling with rising rents and inflation, this shadow bank was artificially driving up property values to facilitate their laundering. They were making it impossible for honest families to buy homes in their own neighborhoods because they were outbidding everyone with bunker cash. The digital forensic team at the FBI has already started cracking the North Star servers, and the initial data dump is a roadmap of treason. It shows that the money from the St. Cloud Bank was being used to fund political action committees that were actively working to install sympathetic candidates in upcoming local elections. They weren't just stealing money. They were stealing the democratic process. They wanted to ensure that no matter who was in the governor's mansion, the St. Cloud corridor remained an open lane for the cartel's profits. The shadow bank was the central nervous system of the entire Somali ring. Without this facility, the money mules had nowhere to take the cash, and the bunker owners had no way to turn their stacks of bills into clean assets. By taking out the St. Cloud hub, the feds have effectively decapitated the financial head of the beast. But the body is still moving. As we speak, satellite raids are occurring in nearby towns like Waite Park and Sauk Rapids, targeting the homes of the property managers who oversaw the day-to-day operations of the fraud properties. These individuals were the enforcers of the shadow bank, ensuring that the tenants remained silent and the shell companies remained active. This wasn't just white-collar crime. It was organized crime with a corporate veneer. They used the same intimidation tactics as the cartels, but they did it while wearing Italian suits and carrying briefcases. The FBI has confirmed that the $500 million seized or frozen today is only the first layer. They expect the total value of the St. Cloud Shadow Bank's holdings to exceed $1 billion once the international accounts are fully audited. This is a staggering amount of money to be flowing through a secondary city in Minnesota, and it points to a massive failure in our financial oversight systems. The banks that handled the wire transfers, the title companies that cleared the property sales, and the state agencies that issued the subsidies all have questions to answer. How did a $500 million shadow economy grow right under their noses? The answer is structured blindness. The cartel knew exactly which buttons to push and which palms to grease to ensure that no one ever looked too closely at the North Star books. They relied on the good neighbor image of St. Cloud to hide their dark operations, believing that federal investigators only focused on the big cities like Minneapolis or Chicago. They were wrong. The tactical reality of today's raid proves that the feds are now playing catch-up with a vengeance. They are using the data from the Money Mule airport seizures to connect the dots across the entire state. If you are still watching, you are seeing the collapse of a criminal empire in real time. Hit the like button to show the algorithm that you want more of these deep dive forensic reports. Comment Shadow Bank below if you think every property management firm in the Midwest needs a full forensic audit. We are the only ones following the money trail from the street corner to the executive suite. The St. Cloud Shadow Bank was the vault, but the gold market in Dubai is the destination. In our next report, we will expose the final exchange, showing exactly how the Minnesota property wealth is converted into bullion and moved beyond the reach of the U.S. Treasury. But for today, the message is clear. The vault in St. Cloud is closed. The agents are still on site, and more arrests are expected before sunset. This is a marathon investigation, and we are just entering the most dangerous phase. The shadow state is backed into a corner, and a cornered beast is always the most violent. We've received reports of cleanup crews being dispatched by the cartel to silence potential witnesses before they can talk to the FBI. The stakes have never been higher. This is military command, and we are the watch on the wall. We don't just report the news, we analyze the tactical movement of the enemies within. Stay tuned, stay vigilant, and don't let the shadow state win by staying silent. The feds have taken the ledgers, but the people must take back their city. The St. Cloud Shadow Bank is just one node in a network that spans the globe, and we will not stop until every node is offline. The corruption we are uncovering is a warning to every city in America. If it can happen in the quiet streets of St. Cloud, it can happen anywhere. The Shadow Bank didn't start with 500 million. It started with one small fraud that was allowed to go unpunished. It grew because of the small-town apathy that the cartel exploits. But that apathy died this morning on Division Street. The sirens you hear in the background of this footage are the sound of a city waking up to a nightmare it didn't know it was living. We will continue to document every raid, every seizure, and every arrest. The data from the St. Cloud servers is already leaking, and the names involved are going to shock the state. From high-end car dealerships to prominent local charities, the Shadow Bank's money has touched everything. It is a contagion of corruption, and as the forensic audit continues, we will be here to translate the numbers into the truth. The $500 million is gone. The offices are empty, and the shadow bankers are in handcuffs. But the money trail is a circle, and it leads right back to the people who were supposed to protect us. We are military command, and we are not going anywhere. The investigation into the St. Cloud Shadow Bank is just getting started, and the Phase 2 raids are already being planned. The feds are looking for the underground vaults that the ledgers suggest are buried beneath some of the rural properties owned by the firm. If the bunkers in Minneapolis were the storage, what lies beneath the quiet cornfields of Stearns County? We are heading there next. Tap the notification bell so you don't miss the moment we uncover the next layer of the shadow state. This is the front line of the fight for the soul of the Midwest, and we are honored to have you on the watch with us. The lights are on in St. Cloud, and the shadows are finally running for cover. The property fraud ring thought they were untouchable, but they forgot one thing: paper trails never die. They just wait for someone with the courage to follow them. And we are following them to the very end. The St. Cloud Shadow Bank is dead. Long live the truth. Stay frosty, stay informed, and keep watching the wall. This is Military Command, signing off for now. But the sirens are still blaring, and the story is far from over.